Magic coffee. The cafe hummed with a comforting clatter of cups and soft chatter as Lionel and Frank shuffled in. Eddie, the owner of the Spider and the Flies, stood behind the counter, wiping a mug with an old cloth, her sharp eyes darting to greet them. Hi, Eddie. Can we have our normal, please? Lionel's cheery voice filled the space, his flamboyant scarf trailing behind him as he took a seat. Oh, morning, Lionel. Hello, Frank. Had a good morning? Eddie replied. Frank slumped into the chair, crossing his arms. No, I'm not going to talk about it, he muttered, his face a storm cloud of irritation. Lionel chuckled. Told you, Eddie. He doesn't want to talk about it. Do you, Frank? Eddie shrugged, unfazed. Well, that's fine, Frank. I've got some lovely homemade scones today. Oh, yes, please. Lionel brightened immediately. And one for Frank as well. Eddie nodded, heading towards the kitchen. Coming right up. Frank sighed heavily, leaning forward on the table. Listen, he began, his tone making it clear. He wasn't actually keen to hold back. I don't want to talk about it, but I can tell you, you're interested, Eddie. So reluctantly, let me tell you. Eddie peeked from the counter. Okay, Frank, go ahead. Well, Frank began dramatically, this morning I got up, went to the bathroom, and came back. Lionel blinked, unimpressed. Is that it, Frank? I do that every morning. Wait, you're not listening. Eddie tilted her head, confused. Go on, Frank. Say it again. Frank raised his voice, clearly exasperated. I got out of bed, walked to the bathroom, left the bathroom, and came back. To bed? Eddie asked. Yes, Frank snapped. But you're missing the point. Lionel stifled a laugh. You didn't get dressed? Frank rolled his eyes. Of course I didn't, Lionel. I went back to bed. He shook his head, muttering, Really? You're as bad as humans sometimes. Lionel smirked. I am a human, Frank. Frank waved it off. Sorry, Lionel. Look. I went to the bathroom and came straight back. Eddie frowned. Were you cold, Frank? It can be bitter in the mornings. Lionel sniffed his jumper. Was it my smell? Sorry about that curry last night, Frank, but I thought the stink was gone by now. Frank groaned. No. In fact, the opposite. Opposite of smell? Eddie asked. No, smell, Frank exclaimed. Yeah, that's it, Lionel said, catching on. Eddie raised an eyebrow. So, you pooped with no smell. Well, what's wrong with that? Frank threw his hands up in frustration. I didn't go. A hush fell over the table as Eddie and Lionel absorbed this revelation. Oh, Lionel said finally, that happens to me when I'm blocked up. Eddie nodded. Same here. Nothing to worry about. Shall I bring your scones? Yes, please, Lionel said eagerly, while Frank was clearly far from over his predicament. Frank leaned in, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial tone. Since I've become human, I go every morning. Before, I'd poo and wee whenever I like. But these humans, he jabbed his finger for emphasis, wear clothes. Makes it difficult. Lionel laughed. Humans? seem to eat, drink, poo, and we with thought, added Frank. Civilized, Eddie offered with a knowing smile. Elephants have huge brains, Frank argued, and they poo without you thinking. Big piles, too, Lionel added, giggling. Frank nodded vigorously. Exactly. Just stick out a leg or squat anywhere. No big deal. But when you can't poop, it's traumatic. Big word, Frank, Lionel teased. Thank you, Lionel, Frank replied, almost smugly. Eddie returned with their coffee, setting it down with care. Here's your coffee, guys. Strong as usual. Frank took a loud, sloppy gulp, letting out a satisfied sigh. Frank, that was not civilized, Lionel scolded. Sip it next time. Frank groaned. Civilized? Don't get being human at all. You can't pee or wee without thinking. And now sipping coffee. Next, you tell me to use knives and forks. You should stop eating with your hands, Frank, Lionel chided. It's embarrassing. Frank smirked, gesturing to Lionel's scone. You're eating that with your hands. With scones, you do, Eddie chimed in. Frank threw up his hands. See? Blimmin' confusing. Humans are stupid. Without another word, he shot up and hurried to the toilet. Lionel glanced at Eddie knowingly. I think that coffee worked, Eddie grinned. I may have added a small laxative. From the bathroom, Frank's booming voice rang out. Wow, should give that 10 minutes, Eddie. Proper elephant. Eddie and Lionel exchanged amused looks. Nice one, Eddie, Lionel said with a wink. Frank emerged moments later, looking relieved. Must have been that coffee, Eddie. Thank you. As they prepared to leave, Lionel waved cheerily. See you tomorrow, Eddie. Bye, Lionel. Bye, Frank, Eddie called after them. Frank shook his head as they walked out. Having a human stomach ain't fun. Come on, Lionel. I'm famished.